Hey, young adults, welcome back to another Thursday at 7:30. We're so glad that you're joining us tonight from wherever you are. Hey, we're in week 3 of a conversation we've been having called Digital Hygiene. And this conversation has been all about how we utilize our digital platforms and how we interact in our digital spaces and really why that matters. And tonight we're going to be closing out this series with a couple of special guests, just kind of talking through this idea of how our faith journey, how our lives following Jesus intersect with how we use our digital spaces and how we're called to use them and interact with the world around us. And I wanted to read you this verse from Matthew chapter 5. It's verse 16. It says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." And as we're having this conversation of how we're called to interact with the world around us, we see that we're called to shine our light. And we know, obviously, that Jesus was speaking to a very different crowd, a very different time period when he was saying these words, that life looks a little bit different now than it did when Jesus was saying this to the crowd of people that he said it to. But the same truth applies, right? We're still called to carry the light of Jesus into the world around us. And we know now, in 2022, that involves the real world, the physical world, our interactions with people around us in our day-to-day, and it involves our digital spaces, these things like Instagram and TikTok and your email and your text messages, right? We are called to still carry the truth and the character of Jesus into the digital spaces that we walk into. So that's the conversation we want to have tonight. I have a few talking points for our guests that I just want to get their thoughts on, which I'm excited to hear about. So I would love to introduce you to them now. I want to start off, I want them to introduce themselves. And I want you guys to do it like this. If you could only tell people what they needed to know about you through your Instagram bio, what would it say? Erica, you go first.
Oh, I gotta go first.
Yeah.
I'm a part of the creative team here at the church. I've been on staff here it'll be 9 years this year, which is crazy to think about. I love my dog. I love ramen. I love live shows, concerts, things like that. I love songwriting. I love life. I'm living it up every day. That's it. I think that's more than the...
accompanied by some emojis? Or?
Oh, definitely like a lightning bolt.
That's a long bio.
Lightning bolt, the little heart on fire emoji, which those things take up 2
Bullet
characters.
point bios are pretty.
Oh, yeah.
You can like...
they're in now.
Oh.
Cool.
Oh, they're in now?
Yeah,
Oh,
bullet point
shoot.
bios.
I gotta
All right.
keep up.
All right, Gabe.
Well, my name is Gabe, and I like to keep it simple. So my wife actually wrote my bio currently, and it just says
It did.
my girl, her name, and then my fam, and then where I work. So I think I just keep it at that.
That's all you need to know.
I don't know what else people need to know about me
They're
online.
married, by the way.
That's my wife right there.
That's them. But even there's nothing about solo in your bio, and I feel like that's a very important part of you guys' lives.
That's true, but then you have to leave some surprises. So as people follow, they'll get to know a little more about me. But on the first contact, they know I'm married and that I work at a church. So that's good for me.
Solid.
Amanda, your bio.
I'm Amanda, and I would say I'd probably leave my bio the way it is. It says that I'm a fly on the wall in the throne room of heaven. And the reason why I would leave it is because I am very poetic. I am very introspective. And the reason I like to think of myself as a fly on the wall is because they're not necessarily significant for the presence that they bring, but the presence that they occupy. And I get to occupy really cool spaces and learn from really cool people like today. And so I would leave it there.
So I mentioned tonight that we have a couple of talking points that I'd love to work through together. And you guys are all here because we believe that each of you carry such a unique perspective about this concept of digital hygiene and how to use our digital spaces. And I wanted to share this thought with you, that you might not be an influencer, but you have influence. And I just want to hear what you guys think about this statement and what it means to you.
I personally, I work a lot with definitions. I just like them because they help me to get a handle on what we're saying. And so I looked up the definition of of influence in general, not an influencer. And it says it's the capacity to have an effect on somebody's character, their development, or their behavior. which I think is pretty powerful. And the fact that all of us have influence is pretty wild to think about. And I'm reminded of, we have a very great influencer voice here at Christ Fellowship through John Maxwell. And he has a quote that says that everybody is a leader because everybody has influence. And so the whole idea that like whether you want it or not, you have it. And so you've got to figure out what to do with it. And I remember when I was younger, my mom would always tell me that like I had influence over a lot of the kids that were following what I was doing, and I wasn't doing great things. And I was like, I didn't ask them to follow me. And she was like, well, they are, so where are you gonna take them? And that really struck a nerve with me from a young age, that I realized I can't always control who follows me, but I can control where I take them.
Right. Yeah. That's really good.
Really good. I mean, I think when I think about influencers, I know for sure I'm not an influencer, quote unquote, the way that like social media makes influencers seem. But I think like Amanda, I think the same thing. Somebody's watching my life. Somebody's looking through the lens of what I'm putting out on my social media. Somebody's watching. Nowadays, you can even see what people are looking at. There are histories that you can look at, and someone's looking at that, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And I want the way I influence people to be positive. I want people to leave their interactions with me digitally, online, to leave with a positive impact, saying, hey, if someone is out there looking at what I'm doing, then they're gonna see godly things, they're gonna see positive things, they're gonna see things that have impact beyond the temporary, and things that are not self-centered, things that aren't selfish, things that aren't egotistical, but rather, hey, I'm pointing to something more important. Yeah. And if I wanna do that with my actual life, in person, and the way I talk to you, or the way I interact with people, I don't want to showcase something else on my social media. And so that to me is, if I have some influence, which I don't know how much influence I have on social media, I want it to be used for that purpose.
That's good. And I think about, it really comes down to the question of, is what I'm putting out there causing a positive change? And, you know, we talk about influencers, and the idea of influencers almost like selling a product or selling an idea or selling a lifestyle or an image to try to obtain. I know for me, I'm not really a person to like buy products from influencers, but Harry Styles is in a corduroy phase right now. I bought like 2 pairs of corduroy pants yesterday. I'm wearing a pair right now, and I was influenced in that way, you know what I mean? So, you know, for me, that was a positive change, but it's a really superficial one. It's just like a really funny example, but I think, is what I'm putting out there pointing people towards something in life that's edifying them, that makes them feel empowered, not jealous, not, I want that and I don't have it. Does it really point people towards, you know, I have a dream for myself and I'm seeing someone else pursue their dreams and getting life out of that, and is it something that I can also pursue for myself in whatever context it looks like for them? It doesn't need to be my life on their life. It needs to be their life. They're seeing me run my race right, and they're like, I can do that too. And so that's a challenge for me. I think a challenge for all of us as believers. Just we have, like you said, we have the influence. It doesn't matter how much or how little, but it matters what we do with it, and it should always point people towards, you know, the fullest life that they could have and dream of.
Yeah, that's great. And you guys are all influencers in my book, okay? You're great. So I'd love to...
Not sponsored.
Well, that leads me to my next point.
Oh, wow, look at that.
If we're talking about like these parallels between our digital lives, if you will, and our lives with Jesus, our lives as followers of Jesus, I think about this kind of recent feature that specifically Instagram has implemented, where you can add collaborators to the things that you upload now. So if Erica and I wanted to upload a picture of the two of us, we could post it. Yeah, prophecy. I could add Erica as a collaborator to my post, and it would share on both of our pages together as one joint effort. And kind of in a similar way, we would say that our collaborator in our situation, or the person that we want to keep in mind every time that we are creating something or sharing something, is Jesus. So I wanted to share this thought with you and get your thoughts on this, that you may not be sponsored, but you do have a collaborator. What do you guys think about this?
I think that's really good. I think when you talk about that new feature, the collaboration post, really it means, hey, this is not just coming from me, it's coming from me and someone else or something else, a business or a company or whatever. And when you're collaborating with someone, both your names are on the product or both your names are on the post. So you're being represented and someone else is as well. And when I think about Jesus being our collaborator in life, if he's our collaborator, would Jesus want his name on what I'm putting out? So would Jesus want to be represented by the actions I'm taking or the things that I'm posting? And I think of 2 verses specifically. One is, therefore we are Christ's ambassadors, as if Christ was speaking through us, making his appeal to a world without hope. And then 2 is live your life worthy of the gospel. Live your life worthy in a manner worthy of the calling you've received. And those to me are very collaboration language. That means you're working with someone, you're working with heaven to make an impact. And that doesn't mean that everything I put out, again, is going to be a gospel presentation, but I think it just goes back to when I am working, maybe contracting or freelance work, will the company I'm working for want their name on the product I'm putting out? Or am I doing something subpar that does not, number 1, expand their brand, or 2, use language and wording that they would want for me to be putting in their mouth? I think of that in that sense for me.
Yeah, and I think about almost the inverse of that, where you're really speaking around our actions being representative of who Christ is in our lives. I think of it the other way around, of Christ, his actions being tied to us, and us living in the outflow of that. And it's back to the basic concept of Jesus dying on the cross for us living in righteousness, living a whole, full life, free from our sin. And just like we need to be mindful of how we post things and how it represents Jesus, like really what we do should be an outflow. Yeah. What we do should be an outflow of what God has done in our lives. It should be such a reflexive action. And that doesn't mean like every single thing has to be a Bible verse or anything like that. But what I'm saying is the content of our character, the integrity that we live by, the way that we treat people should really be an outflow of what we've received in Christ, which is righteousness, freedom from sin, the love of a father that is unconditional. And that should be reflective in the way we treat our neighbor, treat our coworkers, treat our family, our friends, what we post, how we post about people, taking the higher road in situations where it can be really, really easy and with a click of a button just tear someone down. It's really making a choice to say, I've received this in my life, and because of that, I'm going to live in the outflow of that and choose the higher road and live a life that's a little bit different than what most people would choose to live in. And what's honestly easier, it's so easy to go downhill than it is to go uphill. And I'm called to choose the uphill life, even though it's hard. It can get a little tiring, and my legs can get sore. Like all this stuff, like going up the hill can be tough. But I think that's what it means for me, is like collaborating with Jesus is not only, having actions tied to me, but also living the outflow of what he's done for me, and that being reflected in, every area of my life.
That's good.
Man, I'm soaking on everything that's been said. It's so good. I think of this whole idea of collaborating with Jesus reminds me of the concept of the Great Commission, that you're, even in Scripture, it talks about being co-heirs with Christ. Yeah. That word co means it's like being yoked or partnered, if you think of like locking arms with somebody. And so I think the only way that I could fulfill the co-mission is by living in submission. And submission means coming under the mission of somebody else. Right. Yeah. And so I think for me, the distinction that's helpful is I'm not inviting Jesus to accomplish my mission on social media. He's invited me to accomplish his mission on social media or off of it. But no matter what I'm putting my hand to, it's an invitation. And yes, we're collaborating, but we're accomplishing his content. Yeah. And so I think that little nuance has kind of challenged the way that I'll approach a different post. And it invites conviction. It invites I'm only posting this in hopes that they'll see it, or I'm only saying this because I had an argument with this person and they're gonna see that I tagged them and that I wasn't, or whatever. All of those little schemey things that can happen when you're in the digital space that can make it pretty messy. Yeah. When you have a different mission. Jesus definitely has a different mission than getting even or whatever. It can clean up your digital experience a lot.
That's so good.
I feel convicted.
Me too. Me too.
That's great. I've been loving everything you guys have to say so far, and I have one more thought that I'd love for us to work through, one more talking point. And the idea is that, I don't know about you guys, but when I was growing up in high school, maybe even middle school, because we're kind of like the first generation to grow up in the internet, right? Like the first generation of people to have the smartphone for like the majority of our lives. So I remember growing up in school, and the thing that they just always nailed into our heads was like, the internet is forever. Once it's on the internet, it's there forever, and it's not gonna go away. So don't say anything mean to people because they'll see it there forever. And just thinking through this thought of that, I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. You might think it's only digital, but it's also really eternal, right? If we're drawing parallels between literally interacting on social media and in our daily walks with Jesus, this idea that the things that we say, the things that we share, the things that we create, once they're shared, once they're out there, right? And they contribute to our perception, the way people see us, the way people understand who we are, and it all contributes to the story that we're telling, the message that we're telling of who we are and what we believe. So this is what I want to get your thoughts on. You might think it's only digital, but really it's also eternal.
I think I'm already thinking of like, you know, somebody might like have a personality that they carry when they're like in professional world, and it's like the work version of you, and then you have like the social version of you, and then you have like, it just depends, you kind of shape shift. A thought that I had going through my head as you were describing that is like, just convey the same message everywhere that you go. Yeah. Like if I am only nice when I'm at work, that means I'm getting paid to be kind. But if I am kind because kindness is in my character, then I can be at Publix or I can be at 95, and I'm gonna say the same message with my life. And so when I think about like the digital world, oftentimes we can treat it like, well, it's just online, or it was just in a chat, or it was just a story, or it was just a newsfeed post, or whatever. Nobody says newsfeed post, but it was just a post, whatever lines that we try to create like a rite of passage. I'm just reminded, like, just tell the same story, because the digital world isn't where things end. Like you close the app and so it no longer matters. Our words live on. The seeds that you plant in people's lives, they live on, they're eternal. And there's a verse in, let me see, I think it's Matthew, and it talks about not hoarding up treasure down here where it gets eaten by moths and corroded by rust, or worse, stolen by burglars. Stockpile treasure in heaven where it's safe from moth and rust and burglars. And it says, it's obvious, isn't it? The place where your treasure is the place you will most want to be and end up being. And so when I think about like how I sometimes get so glued to my phone as the place I most want to be, it makes me curious of what have I been stockpiling on social media that's temporary, that I should be stockpiling in relationships and community that will outlast my life because I'm contributing to people, not just popularity and likes and posts, like that kind of stuff. Your kids, your grandkids do not care how many likes you got on that photo. They just won't. But they will care if you like them and treat them with kindness and teach them character traits that can help them move on in the world. Like, I just think about how silly it would be if you're like, look at this, fit check I did back in 2022, got 100,000 likes. Like, they just won't even care because it doesn't matter. And so it just makes me feel like I want to aim my life towards the things that will outlast my life, but also matter more.
Yeah, the separation of like digital from real life. Yeah, it's real. Yeah. It's a real problem, and I think we've even gotten to the point where we're trying to separate the digital from the digital, like with like Finstas and our like little hidden accounts and things like that. It's like you have your real life and you have to be a certain way. Then you have your digital life where you want to portray a certain image of yourself. Then to be real and raw, you got to make another one that you only let a certain amount of people into. And it's just such a strange thing how we almost split ourselves into these different like multiversal lives or something like that. Nice. Yeah, and good Marvel reference for my people out there. When really, I just resonate so much with we're called to live one life. We'll live one life well. You're not separating all of those split things are still one life. We're meant to live well. Yeah. And a verse that came to mind was from Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do as if you're working for the Lord. And when I was processing through just like this panel today and what we might be talking about, it brought to mind someone from college that actually passed away my freshman year in a motorcycle accident. And when he passed away, you know, the school was heartbroken. He was like a cornerstone, and went to film school, a cornerstone in film school, and we were devastated, and that was the verse we used for him, because he genuinely was the same person when he was exhausted. He was the same person in class. He was the same person when he was crying over heartbreak. He was the same exact person, and he impacted so many people's lives at that school from living that verse out well. I'm not even talking digitally, because that was before really Instagram like went crazy or anything like that. He just was a genuinely great person, lived out the character qualities of a godly person in every area of his life. And I'm sitting here today, like 10 years later, still reflecting on that. That was a mile marker in my life, made me want to pursue the things that God had called me to, and significantly shifted my college career, unfortunately from his passing, but it was because of the way he lived his life. And so I just think about the way I want to live my life and how consistent I want to be in every arena of my life. And I think the more we press into separating those things, I think the more easy it is to get complacent and also remove the emotion and the accountability, honestly, of the actions that we take. But man, when we view our lives in one pathway, even if it's threads, you know, I have a digital thread, I have my work thread, whatever, but it's all woven together for one straight line of just like, this is the path of my life. Kind of tying into what you're saying, I think it makes us view things with a little bit more weight. And I don't think it needs to be something we shy away from because it has weight, to just understand that there's a positive impact we can have when we lean into the things of God, lean into living a life that honors God first and is motivated by pleasing God first. I think it makes a really big difference, a big eternal impact.
Yeah, and speaking about like splitting, going along with what both of you are saying, it's just exhausting to be two different people. Like, I think you should be yourself, but you should be striving to be a godly self. And even if you're not there, where you're kind and patient and you know, the same person when you're exhausted and the same person when you're not exhausted, you should be striving towards that, and that should be what's reflected in when you're at work or when you're on your digital life, because it really is exhausting to try to create a persona that isn't real, and you're trying to sell a version of you that's not real. But for me, when I think of it's not just digital, it's also eternal, I think of, man, everything that I partake in and take in this life affects my soul. Because that is important. Just like any piece of food or any drink that I think is going to affect me inside my physical body, anything my eyes see, anything my ears hear is going to affect my soul and my heart. And so I know a lot of what we've been talking about is outputting content, but what are you inputting? So what are you watching? What are you looking at? What are you searching for? When you see something that's bad, negative, inappropriate, are you going down that hole? As we're all tempted to sometimes, or are you saying, no, I don't want to watch that, or I'm going to choose not to watch that show on Netflix, or I'm going to unfollow those accounts that either one, I know I shouldn't be looking at, or two, are just hurting my soul. I shouldn't be looking at that person. Something inside of me feels weird when I look at them. I feel maybe envy, I feel anger, I feel pride towards them. Maybe I should unfollow them, because those are not the things I want to be inputting into my own heart. But it takes a lot of self-reflection to do that, and I think it's good to take inventory of your own soul and say, hey, how do I use my digital spaces in an eternal way? And that's kind of what comes to me.
Well, I think about, that's what we strive to be. I think the more we press into, who God has called us to be, the more those things become second nature to us. And it's hard work. It's that hard work of being reflective and taking the time to take a self-inventory to understand. But I feel like once we press into that, and it becomes more second nature to us than it is like, I have to,
And there's plenty of stuff out there.
100%.
There's so many things wrestling for our attention online. I mean, I don't know if they even have enough server space in the world for the amount of content that there is fighting for us. So it's really on us to choose, hey, what is the content that I'm going to be taking in, and making the wise choice.
Yeah, well, I've loved having this conversation with you. I believe it's so important, and I'm so glad that we're having it. And I think we just have such an opportunity and really a responsibility to for it to start with us, right? To make our digital spaces and the places that we occupy online places where people can go to experience truth, the truth of Jesus, the light of Jesus, and experience value being added to their lives and not contributing to the noise, not contributing to the negativity. And I believe that if we take these truths that we've been talking about and apply them to the way that we operate online, that we can see change, we can see value added, and we can have good digital hygiene. So just remember these truths. You might not be an influencer, but you have influence. Yeah. You might not be sponsored, but you have a collaborator, and you might not think beyond digital, but really it's eternal. So we've loved having this conversation with you, and we want to keep having it, and we have the opportunity to do that now in our group. So as soon as we finish up here, we're all going to log off and jump onto the Zoom app and have this conversation together in our small group. So you can text the word YA group to 441-441, and that'll send you a direct link to click on and be able to join a group, join this conversation as we continue to work through some of these things together. But we love you, young adults, and we'll see you back here next Thursday.